YouTube, Aiden here. Reminder, if you want a lesson, check the link in the description. Let's talk about this giant undertaking I've done, which is not really giant, but has taken up a significant amount of time. And in that time, I haven't really made any videos. I put up a multi-track that I did with Arisa that I thought was pretty neat. I think I plan on doing a couple more of those soon, with another one with her, maybe another couple with some other people, Zachary Liddy maybe. Anyway, what I've been doing is a really kind of grueling for me anyway, series of fundamental things every day. So the last 12 days I've been doing something, we'll talk about that. And the days before that, I think the 5 days before that, I did all 12 scales, all major, 3 minors, chromatic, and every arpeggio. I did all of those on all 5 instruments. So I did like bass, large tenor, small tenor, euphonium, contra. And I did those for 5 days, which was very revealing. And I was like, wow, I'm really bad at a lot of things. And then the last 12 days, I have been doing this playlist put together by Eli Morgenstern and Brian Santero, who are trombonists of the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. They put together this trombone fundamentals playlist, and it basically just has a bunch of exercises that anyone would play, anyone would put in a book, whatever, but they've all got backing tracks, and there's stuff that I haven't necessarily played before, and he's got them set up in 3 different tempos. So there's a regular tempo, a slow tempo, and a fast tempo for almost every exercise, not every single one. And it's just kind of set up in a good way that if you just play straight through it, you kind of hit everything that you really need to hit. Probably not exactly everything, but all the big things. So for the last 12 days, I have done, in this order, I did bass, euphonium, large tenor, small tenor, and I did 4 days of regular tempo, and then the same order, 4 days of slow tempo, and then 4 days of fast tempo, all the way through the playlist, which takes about an hour plus every day. Obviously, the slower tempos take a little bit longer, faster ones take a little bit shorter, etc. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I learned about my instruments. I didn't play this, I haven't played this in like 2 weeks, and what I've learned about my playing and my face and my air and all that kind of stuff. So here's the introduction. First up, I'm going to talk about what I learned about my bass trombone. Alright, on to the bass trombone, the first instrument in my rotation. Each 4 days I would start with this one. And I learned a lot of things about my playing. We'll talk about that at the end of this video. And also about this instrument in particular. Again, this is a Bach 50G, the gold bell, with Shire's valves in place of the Bach valves, Shire's dual slide, Lasky 93D. I don't think a lot has changed about this. I think I changed the lead pipe, and I don't know if I announced that. That's fine. Playing my Bach 50 lead pipe again after a foray into other lead pipes, Shires and stuff. Back on this one. In any case, let's talk about high range. So this playlist is developed by a bass trombonist and a tenor trombonist, but they both have really solid fundamentals, and obviously Eli Morgenstern, the bass trombonist, does not neglect the high range. So there's a bunch of really high stuff, slurs and stuff that go above the staff up to high F, above high B flat, scales that go up to high D, etc. Things that just kind of stay above the staff. And as a bass trombonist, I want to be able to play that stuff, and honestly, sometimes I can. This horn doesn't make it the easiest for me, though. I have played other bass trombones recently that did have better high ranges, and that's just something I would really enjoy having. It's now that I play this high range a little bit better, and we'll talk about that later too, it'd be nice to have a horn that kind of works with me rather than I have to do everything exactly right or it doesn't happen. That's not to say that it's impossible on this horn. I can make it happen, but it's not always the exact articulation, sound, or ease that I would enjoy out of an instrument. And it's kind of weird because I just played my friend's Greenho Con bass trombone. It's a really good horn, sounds great, it's easy to play. The high range on it though is 100% worse than this. It has like almost no slots above, maybe D above the staff. And I was like, dang, this must be really good at high range, and I've been playing it. And then I played some horns at NAMM, and I was like, oh, these horns are probably 100% better than this, if not more. So, yeah, this isn't the worst high range out of an instrument that I've ever had. It's not the best, and I would really enjoy just having a horn that would work with me a little bit, rather than, it doesn't fight me, but it doesn't help at all. Let's talk about low range. This is a range that I basically had to almost start from scratch. I've always been good at low range. I think I could always make notes happen below the staff, but it's not always been in the most healthy way. And basically what I've done is bring my mid-range chops down rather than bringing my low-range chops up, because my low-range set was kind of incorrect. And the low range did get better. There's very little pedal stuff in this playlist, and I really wasn't practicing pedals outside of the playlist, really, other than some etudes and things. But my pedals have gotten way better, and this horn is not really impeding that. These valves, even though they are just rotors, are actually quite open. They're not open to the point of being too open, like my last set of Meinl-Schmidts, but they feel pretty good. I think the problem I have is that they're kind of finicky. They are old and well used, and they do leak if I don't oil them kind of regularly. Also, the linkage I have, it's not garbage, but it's not great. It doesn't feel very positive. Like a lot of people say positive feeling action is like the bolt action on a rifle or something. These don't feel like that. Kind of squidgy. There's lots of there's not a lot of play. There's not like things like rattling and stuff, but there's so many like bendy parts and stuff, but so that it never feels like you're actually putting the valve down. I don't know. Something I would definitely like to change at some point. What else do I have about this instrument? The sound. So something that I found out and so I played this playlist and I took a break, then work on music and stuff, is that this horn does not really want to play orchestral music. It doesn't want to play excerpts. It doesn't want to get that sound, that articulation, the sustain that really helps that kind of music, which is not entirely unexpected. This horn I kind of set up to be a commercial style horn, because my other horn will be a very orchestral instrument when it gets finished. But it still bothers me because right now it's the only bass trombone I have, and I would still like to work on excerpts sometimes. However, when I work on commercial stuff, because I have some etudes and whatnot, I think I put one up maybe a month ago, it really does trend towards that style, and it feels great. There we go. And it still has a nice, fat sound with a lot of center to it. It just doesn't have a very, I don't know, there's something about the sound that doesn't really lend itself to the orchestral style. And that's, like I said, not an entirely bad thing. But when I want to play excerpts and stuff, I'll play some for a bit and I'm like, it doesn't feel good. It feels like I'm playing like a small bore horn to play Mahler 3 solo or something. The instrument wants to do its own thing, and I'm trying to force it into it's like a round peg into a square hole. So that is kind of a bummer, but not entirely surprising. And I do have a horn eventually that will be finished that will do that kind of thing. So learned some things about my bass trombone, some things that are great, some things that are not great. Let's go on to the euphonium. On to the euphonium, which I just played. It's right here. So, big thing about this instrument is these stupid valves. Man, sometimes I literally wanted to punch this euphonium into the wall because of these stupid valves. Long story short, I've had this euphonium since 2007. It's my first instrument that I own. If you didn't know already, I started out as a euphonium player and then quickly transitioned into trombone in college. I already played trombone in high school, but plan on doing this in college. I did not do that the whole time, and I've had this the whole time, but for I think a year in college, I actually lent this to a friend of mine who also played euphonium, and she didn't have a good instrument of her own. And like a good Yamaha player that I am, I used Yamaha valve oil, there we go, not slide grease, Yamaha valve oil on the valves. And not really knowing that I did that, she used blue juice on the valves. And so the valves were just kind of trashed for about a year because she never cleaned it or anything. It got really disgusting. She just kept putting more blue juice on and just kept gumming up even worse. Then I got it back and then I didn't play it for a while. And kind of overall, the valves just kind of got not destroyed. They still work, but man, they are just so much worse than a lot of other valves that I've used. They've gotten a lot better now that I just play this a lot, but still, enraging. Part of the problem is Yamaha uses this metal in their valves called Monel, which is an alloy of these different metals. It's pretty soft, and it'll wear down, and the ports in the valves, like the things that the air actually goes through, those are made out of brass. And the brass will actually start to expand away. So if this is the valve casing, just like the stuff that the valve is made out of, the ports will start to expand away from the valve casing and start to be larger than the valve casing itself and get kind of caught up in the valve. At least that's what my tech friend told me. Pretty typical problem with Yamaha valves. I've had these worked on, I've had them lapped at least like 4 times now. I've done it myself even. And even then, in this playlist, a lot of the stuff is just one valve at a time because you're playing slurs or whatever. And at the end, you play scales. And sometimes I would get to the scales and first valve would just be like, no, I'm not doing this. And it would just stick. Oh, man. I think I figured out a fix where I unscrew the valve and kind of just turn it around and get oil everywhere again without having to clean it all. Anyway, that was my biggest problem with this instrument is the stupid valves. It just makes me want to play trombone when that happens because as bad as a trombone slide can be, none of my trombone slides are that bad. Anyway, much of my approach to the euphonium is and definitely was wrong. I still play it like a trombone player. I've never been 100% euphonium player except for maybe the first few years of high school. And I wasn't a good euphonium player, so it doesn't really count. And I forced the instrument into a sound it's not really trying to make. I forced the low range because I thought I could just kind of make it happen. The high range, I just wasn't playing very well. That's kind of the general feeling for all these instruments. The articulation, I'm still not sure about. I don't know how to articulate it on euphonium. It's a totally different thing. And valve slurs I've always been kind of iffy at. I like to manipulate them with my face. And I did get better at all of these things playing this playlist. So I am glad I did this. One of the big things I figured out is intonation. I've never really sat down with this and just figured out all the quirks. I knew some of them. I kind of just accepted that some things are just going to be out of tune. I've gotten past that. I like to be in tune more of the time. And playing this playlist, a lot of things kind of iron themselves out. I'm not sure if it'll be that way now because I haven't played this really at all today except for just now. I figured out the B in the staff has always been really flat for me, a really horrible note. And of course, the only other option is to play 1, 2, 3 without the 4th valve, which is insanely sharp. Which is obviously not an option. So I had a flat B and I had a sharp B. Now, this B is more in tune. And I have everything in the same place. I think I'm playing it better. High G. Well, now it's a little flat, but I have been playing that with third valve instead of 1 and 2. 1 and 2 is pretty sharp, and right now, third valve is about the same amount flat. So, again, I don't have a good option for high G. Whatever, they're all out of tune. I could probably put that 1 and 3. High B has gotten a little better. That's my nemesis note. I was about to play this instrument with a big symphony orchestra on the first part of Janáček Sinfonietta, which has a bunch of articulated, loud, high Bs that you have to hold out. It's like the worst nightmare of all time for a euphonium player, and I'm not sure if I would have played it well then. I think now it would be a little better. Well, maybe not. Maybe a little better. That's just not a great note. The slot for that is literally like 2 cents wide. If you miss it a little high, you play C sharp. If you miss it a little low, it fuzzes out. Maybe you play an A. It's a pretty horrible note. High E flat, the E flat below that, is a really insanely sharp note. Ugh, and now I'm playing really badly too. Anyway, you can hear it's a really sharp note, and I couldn't figure out a good way to play that. I was playing it with the fourth valve and first valve. I really don't like that sound. It sounds very French horny. You're playing through too much of the instrument, and the attack is horrible. It really sounds like you're playing a lower valve combination than you should. Someone clued me into 1 and 3. Which responds much more like first valve by itself and is pretty much straight up in tune. So thank you whoever told me about that. 1 and 3 is kind of the way to go. Of course, it's really awkward when you're playing like the key of A flat. That's a really awkward thing to do. It's like the worst valve combination to make. And sometimes you're going to have to do that, I guess. And then the biggest thing that I found out is high B flat. It's always been like an okay note for me. It's never been like really out of tune or flat or anything. Now that I'm playing the high register a lot better, it's got this giant slot. I'll turn this around so you guys can see it, maybe? No? Well, you can see the lights at the top. I can play that literally like 30 cents high and 30 cents low. And the natural place for it to lie, if I don't do anything, is about 25 cents high. It just wants to be super sharp, which I was playing these slurs and my B flats would be really crazy sharp, and I'm like, sharp? Why is it sharp? The rest of my instrument is in tune. Nothing is that sharp. I'm not playing everything else flat. Turns out that note just has a giant slot, and you have to think about it and play it farther down. It is an option, but man, it is not the natural place for it to lie. That was a really big surprise for me. Having a giant slot up there. Trombones, I don't know, usually don't have a thing like that. The general feeling I have with euphonium is, wow, I have a long ways to go. I'm not a euphonium player. I am okay at it. I feel like I can kind of hide and I can convince people that I'm a euphonium player, but I'm definitely not 100% there. I got a long ways to go. Up next is the large tenor trombone. On to the large tenor trombone. This is it, my Bach 42 with the big mouthpiece and the A47 slide and all that kind of stuff. Really good instrument, turns out. But the first thing I learned about this is I think this is probably, going into this, my worst instrument overall. I said a bunch of bad things about euphonium, but I can play euphonium. This can lick me. It can be the worst instrument of all my instruments. Probably because I've played it the least, I would say. I have put in a lot of time on euphonium, obviously a lot on bass trombone, and recently I put a lot of time in on the small tenor. this I've not quite put as much time into. That's not to say I haven't practiced it, but just on hours per instrument, this probably has the least. One of the things that doesn't help me is my mouthpiece. I have this Greg Black Joseph Alessi 3.5 M, which is not a good beginner mouthpiece for a large tenor trombone, or if you're someone like me and just plays with like a bunch of really bad habits, not a good mouthpiece for that either. This rim, especially the Joseph Alessi rim, is kind of a wide, rounded rim, which is everything that I don't like in a rim. Honestly, I like pretty thin, pretty flat rim if I get to make a choice on what I'm going to play. This is everything I don't like, and mainly that's because the habits that I've used in the past really do not jive with this kind of rim. Does that mean I'm wrong, or does that mean the rim is wrong? Part of it's definitely me. I need to be able to play this kind of stuff better. And guess what? Doing this routine for 2 weeks made me a lot better at it. But this wide rim really punishes pressure, especially. And since that's the way that I approached the high range for so long, I just thought I was really bad at high range. Turns out that if you play with nice firm corners, not a ton of pressure, you know, just the right amount in the middle, and nice relaxed aperture, all that kind of stuff, it works really well. You can play really high, you can play really low, you can make great attacks. Makes a really glorious sound when you do it right. And it just took me a lot of time to figure that out. I think I knew that in my head, but I've never really gotten to the point where I was just like, yeah, I feel comfortable playing this. Even now, I pick it up and I'm just like, oh, wow, that's totally different. I'm not sure if I want to play that right now. So yeah, mouthpiece, I love it. I hate it. I love it. I thought about sending this off to Doug Elliott and getting the rim taken off and getting a different rim. Still not sure. I think I'm just going to play it for a while. It's not like I have any gigs coming up, so nothing really to make me move in one direction or the other. The low range on this instrument does have a good low range. I was playing it badly. I really like to manipulate, especially on a smaller horn than bass trombone like this. I love to manipulate things with my face, and especially like low F. A lot of people will say, oh, low F in first is really flat. Don't play low F in first. Usually that's either because they have this pulled out too far because they're playing C in first position instead of F. That's how they have it tuned, which is their choice. Or it's because they're not playing very well, and if you try and kind of force that note, it's really easy to play flat. But if you relax, play with basically the same way that you do B flat. Guess what? It works really well, and it sounds good, and it just feels great, especially with the Thayer. Man, love this valve. People talk crap on them all the time. Sorry, it's a pretty good valve. And the range below that, also pretty great. And again, I talked about this on bass trombone. The pedals, without having worked on them at all, got a lot better. On bass trombone, there's a lot of wiggle room to kind of play those badly. On large tenor trombone, there isn't. And I feel like I've finally come to a place where I'm like, oh, that's how you make pedals sound. And it's made my bass trombone playing a lot better. It's made this playing a lot better too. I still have some room to grow. Obviously, there's some tenor players out there with crazy pedals. I'd like to be one of those people, but we'll see. High range, of course, I was approaching that the wrong way. I was using a lot of pressure. A lot of it was just not using my air efficiently, and my aperture is usually too large, which means you're using too much air. It's just going by too fast. And guess what? That's not the way you should probably play. There's one articulation exercise in this playlist. It's really simple. It just runs you through triplets. I'm not even going to play it. It runs through triplets, going through different articulations just on one note. It goes B flat, bunch of triplets on B flat, bunch of triplets on D, and then a bunch of triplets on F. And on the F triplets, every time I would get to the end of it, it's only like 3 bars at like bup, 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 bup. At the end of it, I would just be like dying. I'd be using so much effort to make these notes come out. And I was like, you know what? I don't see good tenor players dying at the end of a phrase like that. They could probably do this twice. Maybe a tiny little snip breath in the middle. And they just be like, whatever, I'll just go play something else now. And I was just like, so I kind of reevaluated my approach and just was like, I'm going to do it like they do. Guess what? I got a lot better. And this instrument was kind of the one that told me that I was doing it wrong. It wasn't the instrument that I did it right on first, but it was the one that told me I was doing it wrong, which was nice to know. This horn really doesn't have any crazy quirks. Some of the things that I thought it had, quirk-wise, were just me, honestly. I think the F valve lever for this is not in the best place. You can see how high it is compared to the mouthpiece. I think it would be better if it were like here. It'd be a lot easier to get to with my thumb. I can still hold this comfortably, but this actually gave me the worst trouble with my hand kind of cramping up after a while of all my trombones and euphonium, which is interesting. I mean, the bass trombone's heavier, it's got 2 valves, and it does give me trouble after a while. This one gives me more trouble, even with the strap. So, something about the ergonomics there. Oh, excuse me, something I might have to change. Also, this doesn't really pull quite long enough to get a good E-pull. I don't know, not a huge deal for me. Honestly, I really like this instrument. I'm not seeing myself getting something crazy different, obviously because I can't buy anything right now, but also because it's really good. And I think it's an instrument that will grow with me as I get better at it. Up next is the small tenors. There's 1.5 of those. So next in our instrument lineup is the small tenors. I have 1.5 of these after all, 2 bell sections and 1 slide. This is the last instrument in the rotation every day. After this, of course, is my conclusion, so don't stop watching if you care. I'm looking at you. Anyway, let's get on to these. The big takeaway I had from the small tenors is that, and both of them, of course, are King 3Bs, 1 silver sonic, 1 not silver sonic with an F attachment. They're just awesome instruments. Man, they're just so good. They're so easy to play. They just sound good everywhere. I don't know, everything about them is just really satisfying. I feel like there's some instruments, like my 36B actually, great instrument, made a good sound, just wasn't very satisfying to play. Like I would play it and be like, yeah, I love 36s, and then after a while I'm like, I don't know, I'm just not feeling it. Whereas when I play this, I kind of don't want to put it down. I just want to keep playing it. If I had 1 trombone, I only had a choice, I had to pare down to 1 instrument, I think I'd choose this one. Sorry, I know you're right here, but I'd probably choose this. It's just very satisfying to play. I just love everything about it. Moving on. So differences between these bell sections. Obviously, the visual differences. This is silver, this is not. This has a counterweight, this doesn't. This has an F attachment, this one doesn't. That's probably it. Otherwise, tuning-wise, this bell section is a little bit shorter than this bell section. If you can see, and I think it's actually fallen in a little bit since I started filming, this tuning slide is out a little bit farther than this tuning slide is to get to the same B flat. I think overall this is weirdly just a little bit shorter. So a little oddity, I don't know why that is. King did a lot of different stuff with 3Bs over the years. These have been made for like 50, 60 something years at this point. So there's going to be differences, whatever. The big one is actually playing it, since when you pull the tuning slide out, whatever, that doesn't really matter. The F above the staff is basically straight up in tune on this in first position. Maybe a tiny bit of adjustment, but honestly it can go either way. I played it flat and sharp. Probably some of that is me just being inconsistent and having it not played this at all today yet, except for what you just heard. Whereas that F, that partial, the sixth partial on this bell section is considerably sharper. I think it's kind of like the euphonium. The partial is just a little bit wider on this, so there's more room to go up. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. The high range on this instrument is actually a little bit better. I'm not sure, it's not like 100% better, it's just kind of a little easier to slot. And of course, I miss the first high note that I want to play. It just feels a little more centered up there than the Silver Sonic does. This can be a little wide. It can feel like kind of like a large bore tenor trombone. A little more room, but maybe a little less ease to really nail stuff up there. Yeah, I can play that note. I can play it a little louder actually, but it doesn't have quite the same slot that that one does. Flexibility, actually the brass bell, I guess this isn't a huge surprise, is a lot more flexible. I would play most of the routine, I almost couldn't get this nut out. I could play most of the routine on this bell section, because you don't need an F attachment for most of it. And then I would switch over to the other one here to play some other stuff that needed the F attachment. And then I would play some more slurs and things on this. And I was like, whoa, this is a lot easier to slur around on. And obviously it has a better low range just because it has an F attachment. The low range does sound different. This has a little less weight to it. I still quite like the sound. It's not like a really massive, large bore sound, of course. But this has just a little more presence to it, a little more sound that you can feel, at least behind the bell. And of course, the next thing I wanted to talk about was feedback. This just has a lot more sound that comes off the sides of the bell and just kind of convinces you that you're making a larger sound. Out in front of the bell, does it really make that much more sound? I'm really not sure. I'd like to get out in the real world and try it at some point. Not going to happen for a while, of course. It's kind of odd because usually the brass bell will give you a little more feedback. The silver bell will kind of not let you know what's happening. And it might only be because I'm in this tiny little room. The sound doesn't really have anywhere to go except for back to my ears. And outside, maybe I would actually hear myself a little less on this one. So the low range on this is just like the low range on all the other instruments, except it is even more revealing if you're doing it wrong. And basically I was just trying to do too much to make these notes happen. What you can do on bass trombone and get away with it for a really long time. That's what I did for years. It's just punch notes in the face until they come out. If you do that on a small bore instrument like this, it's not going to happen. But if you relax and use kind of the same embouchure that you use for the middle upper range, it works great. You do have to accept that you're playing on a 6.5 AL. In my case, it just isn't the room for the same kind of articulation and ease of moving around that you get on even a large bore tenor, but of course on a bass trombone, where there's just a lot more room with the slot, with the mouthpiece, everything to make things happen. This gotta be pretty much right on, or the note's not gonna come out, or it's gonna sound awful. And it's a lot harder to move that much air through tiny little 6.5 AL. This is not tiny, I shouldn't say that. And this instrument, the 3B, both of these, are really the first ones where I started to figure out, going through this routine, how to approach the high range with ease rather than just punching it. So I'm very grateful for this instrument teaching me how to do that. I realized I was doing it wrong on another instrument, and this is the one where I was like, oh, this is how I do this. More like this. Rather than trying to just make these notes happen. Using lots of corners, but lots of air to make things happen rather than just mashing the mouthpiece into the face. So very grateful to that. Up next is my overall impressions of everything combined. Talk a little more about me. So, my overall impressions of everything, how it all kind of melded together. How do I feel about this, my air and my ears, all that kind of stuff. And why I would do a fundamentals routine like this and just kind of pound it into my head for so long. Overall, the curve that I would give this to my improvement would be a U shape. It would go like this. Oh, hey, now I'm getting better again. It would just have kind of a roller coaster, like, this sucks, I'm really bad. Oh, hey, I'm starting to figure things out. And of course, I did this for 12 days plus the scales before that, so maybe we'll call it like 2 weeks. And I would say a solid 5+ days of that were downhill, where I was playing through it, and I was like, man, I can't make it to the end of this without being completely chopped out. Or I can't do this exercise with a good sound, or with good time, or whatever. And then eventually, I got to the bottom, and I was like, you know what, I'm starting to see improvements on the high range register, a high range portion of this. Or, wow, my articulations on this are way better. The low range doesn't sound like complete garbage anymore. Well, hey, I can almost play the whole thing. So, if you do this, or something like this, just know that the whole thing is not just going to be this. It's not just going to be getting better the whole time. It's always, and Phil Teal has this, the late Phil Teal has this in his book. It kind of looks like a stock market graph, right? Not like one right now where it's just like this, but a stock market graph where it goes up and then something happens. And then it goes up, and then there's a little zag, and a zig, and a zag, and a zig. Its overall trend is like this. But if you look at it in minute detail, it's always, 2 steps forward, a half step back. There's always a little bit or you're getting worse, right? So don't be afraid of that. Get into it anyway. Sometimes it's really hard to push through those moments. It is for me too, because playing is my life. It's what I do. It's my job. Not right now, but usually it's my job. And it's hard to admit that you're really bad at something, but just know that it's going to get better, right? If you keep putting in the work. Next thing up, intonation. Always been a bugaboo of mine. I'm not, I have ears. I can play with other people and be in tune and stuff, but it's really hard for me to just sit down and just play everything in tune. Part of that was my face. It's really hard to play things in tune when you don't have a good center to the sound, when you can't hear the center to your own sound because you're not playing with a good sound, obviously, and when you have such tension in the way that you play that you can't just play a long tone and just play it straight and easily. Those things I've all kind of ironed out. Obviously, I still have lots of room to grow. But just playing a bunch, having my ears open, having a tuner in front of me the whole time. That's metronome, not a tuner. That part's a tuner. Really kind of clued me into a bunch of tendencies of mine, and just I didn't let myself get away with being ultra out of tune. And on every single instrument, my intonation got a lot better. I would just play an exercise, and I would end on a note, and look at the tuner, and it would be straight up and down the whole time. And I'm like, hey, look at that. Sometimes I can play in tune. Obviously, it takes you being really aware and cognizant and actually trying to be in tune rather than just letting it happen accidentally. So, it takes effort on that as well, not just playing randomly and just hoping you get better in tune. Low range, I talked about this on every instrument, but it improved on every instrument so much. I'm kind of surprised. I always thought my low range was good. It was good, but not for the right reasons. It's because I was always forcing it. I've had videos in the past where it's play with ease, blah, blah, blah. And I think I was getting better at the time, but now I just got a lot better in one go. I'm really happy about that. In this playlist, there's not a ton of low range stuff. There's some. So I'm happy that even just with that little bit of low range stuff, it got way better. And I'm very excited to play low now with a better sound and just ease. One really big thing what I don't talk about a lot, and I think a lot of people don't talk about a lot, is time. Not this kind of time, but this kind of time. I made me realize pretty hardcore how bad my time is. A lot of times, and not, of course, since we've been in quarantine, I've had this constantly. I've not really played without metronome because it's a good thing to play with. But I'll let myself get away without playing with metronome, and I'll play with metronome and not record myself. One of the days that I played, and I think it was the fast run through on large tenor trombone, so only like 3 days ago, I played the whole thing through while recording myself. And after every video, I went and listened to it. And on almost every single video, I was playing behind the backing track. Almost every single one. And I realized I'd been reacting to the backing track, or metronome, whatever you want to use, the whole time, instead of being proactive, having my own time, and only using this to check in. And of course, after that, I got way better. And my time overall, the whole time I did that, just got way better, just being so much more aware of subdivisions and stuff. It's so important to have good time. If you have the best sound in the world and like so much musicality, but you can't come in time like I just didn't do with my speech, if you can't just come in, then it doesn't matter. You have to be in time. It's such an important thing. And that's something I'm really going to spend a lot of time on. A lot of time on my time. And then my last point, ease. I have a video about ease, I think. And I don't know, it's like a year and a half old or something like that. It's probably way outdated. This is my biggest thing, just playing with ease. It's so easy on trombone to not be easy, to use a bunch of effort to play. And I've always been that way. I have been for a long time. I've been wanting to make a video about this. And this really just kind of put everything into perspective. You gotta play easily. And it is not easy to play with ease. That's the problem. It takes so much of the right things at the right time for you to play with ease. It really takes like having a nice firm embouchure with good corners, relaxed middle, good air. You know, you're not using a lot of effort with your arms, and like all these different things kind of have to be in line for you to play with ease. And I feel like I'm finally getting to that point. I would love to know an easier way for you guys to get to that point. I don't know what it is. I think it just takes a lot of time on the instrument, doing something like this really consistently. I just want to point out that pretty much everyone that you admire trombone-wise plays with a lot of ease. They either natural and they just started out doing it the right way, or they've had to beat themselves into submission the way I just did to a point. They've done it much better than I have by just playing a lot and kind of getting that point of ease. And like I said, it's all about keeping the center of the chops loose, letting it do what it needs to do to move around the instrument, articulate, and all that kind of stuff. Having nice firm corners so you don't just go blah, 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 and sound awful. And letting the air do the work, right? A lot of my problems come down to pressure. I keep flip-flopping between like not enough pressure and way too much pressure. My higher range definitely used too much pressure. My lower range actually wasn't using enough in some cases. And a lot of the endurance problems that I think people have really boil down to them not playing easily enough. They're trying to use too much muscle to make things happen for too long rather than sitting back, relaxing, and just playing with a better sound than I just did. But just letting things happen. If you watch the top players, they're so relaxed. John Rojak has a quote where he's like, playing bass trombone well should be like 70% of your way to falling asleep. And I think that's totally accurate. And it's just, for me, it's been really hard to get to that point. And this has been a good way to do that. A big point for me is that when I'm playing my best, when I'm playing my easiest, it feels like the trombone, rather than being this awkward big metal thing in front of me that I'm holding up and it feels like it's a part of me. It feels like this hand is actually connected to my face rather than hand, grip, trombone, lead pipe, mouthpiece, face, etc. It feels like it's all one big thing. So if you can get to that point, and I'm literally at some points I was just like, I'm going to pretend this is part of me and play. And I would always play better. It's a good way to trick your brain into do it, right? And the last point, the last thing I'm going to say is that the more you can nail down these things like this, just playing with the ease and like good air and intonation, all that kind of stuff, the more you can nail this stuff down, the more you can focus on what we should be doing, which is making music. And that's all I've ever wanted to do, and I just have never been able to just make music. Feel like I'm so much closer now. Thanks for sitting through this probably way too long video, and I'll see you guys next time.